Acapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have a great first-time guest coming in from the Boston area. It's Bruce Fenton, a very well-known Bitcoin investor. He's involved in the Bitcoin Foundation. He's, I believe, on the board of it. He's also a liberty activist and involved in liberty and things like that, so I'm really happy to have him on. And so Bruce, let's get it started right away. How did you become an anarchist?
Well, I think it's been a gradual process. I'm not as quick of a learner as some people with a lot of things like Bitcoin and other things. I think, like a lot of people, I was first exposed to ideas of liberty from Ron Paul, probably around 2005, 2006, something like that. Prior to that, I was a libertarian and anarchist without really knowing what those words meant. I remember taking one of those online polls that said, where do you fit politically? And I think I came up as a libertarian back probably early 2000s, but I didn't really know what that means. I had friends who said, well, don't pay attention to those guys. They're all crazy. So I didn't think much of it. And I kind of went back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. I liked fiscal conservatism, but I didn't really see that much with the Republicans. And I liked peace, which I also didn't see with Republicans, and then later on didn't see with the Democrats either. So it's been a gradual process, but starting probably the early 2000s, I started down that journey, and I'm still learning. There's things even in the last couple of years that I've become a lot more freedom oriented to as I've learned more.
That's great, and you've been very involved in Bitcoin. Of course, Bitcoin just smashed through $1,000 on the very first day of 2017. It's been up and down since then, a little volatile since then. But why don't you tell us about how you got into Bitcoin?
Well, I think I first heard of it from some of my friends that are anarchists and libertarians. I have a lot of people who are members of the Free State Project in New Hampshire, and that has been ever since a few years ago when Eric Voorhees and Charlie Shrem and Roger Ver went up and spoke at PorcFest. I think it's 2010 or 11. That community has had a strong number of supporters who really got it and understood the economic implications. So I think one of them was trying to sell a gun for Bitcoin. And I kind of got interested in it, and then I bought some, and it went way up. And I said, what is this? Why is it going up? I just bought it as a speculator. I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't care that much about the economics. I wasn't that into it. I just thought I'd make some quick money. But once I did make some money on it, then I started saying, well, should I cash in or look into this more? Why did this happen? And then I became hooked. So it took me a few months longer than most people, I think.
So since then, you've, of course, gotten to know Bitcoin very well to the point where you're on the Bitcoin Foundation. You have your own event called the Satoshi Roundtable, which is coming up in a few weeks, which you've invited me to. Thank you very much. And so why don't you tell us about your evolution of Bitcoin since you found out about it at PorcFest?
Well, the first thing that really clicked for me was realizing this was an invention, not just... It was more than just a commodity. It was a new invention, and that invention is the blockchain, and that is something that I think will change the world. I believe in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is going to succeed. But even if I'm wrong, there's no doubt in my mind that blockchain will succeed. Blockchain is a better way of doing things. It's a new invention. And I think that eventually, hopefully, pretty much all assets that can be digitized will be digitized. And ideally, digital isn't the key. People talk about electronic money being as if it's some kind of advantage. Electronic money is actually horrible unless it's decentralized, because it gives even more ability for state actors or others to seize it or control it. And so hopefully you'll see more assets that will move to the Bitcoin-like blockchain or maybe even the same chain. They can piggyback off of Bitcoin, and you'll see that. So that was the first thing that interested me. And then as I got further into it, I saw the economic implications and the freedom implications, the censorship resistance. And then I had been thinking about the Fed a long time, like a lot of people, but I hadn't really thought about what is the solution other than sort of conventional means like auditing the Fed or something like that. But really, what I believe, and I think it will unfortunately probably be a long road, but I really believe that this technology is the beginning of the end of Federal Reserve banks. Just, I think yesterday I tweeted that tribal elders used to get together in tents and decide when they thought it should rain, and it was just nonsense. They weren't really making it rain. And I think that monetary policy will be that way eventually, where you'll still have these supposedly wise graybeard folks who will get into some fancy building called a central bank, and they'll decide where they think the world economy will go, but it won't really have any effect. The real economy will be driven by people, and hopefully that would be because there's huge adoption of Bitcoin and Bitcoin-like currencies where people control their own destiny, not some central banker.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful if that were to happen, if the markets were actually quite free, if the monetary system was not completely controlled, and if there wasn't central banks manipulating interest rates as well, and governments taxing and regulating and all that kind of stuff. But how have you seen sort of Bitcoin over the last few years since you've really gotten into it, in terms of sort of the progression of, do you see, like you say, you're quite bullish on it now, that you think it's really it has a really good shot to work now? I'm sort of the same as you. 2013 was still quite early for me. I didn't see enough stuff happening. I was quite surprised it went over 1,000 at that time. But in the last 2 years, really, just seeing an explosion of activity in the entire space, and I really see a lot of good things ahead for Bitcoin at the moment. What's your take on where Bitcoin is at right now?
I think it's in a great position. I think that either this is going to work as a currency or it's not. And if it doesn't work, well, it'll go down to $1 or $3 or $5 or something like that. It'll still be used by a core number of supporters who will always be there, just like online multiplayer games never die. There's even MUDs going back to the 80s that still exist, text-based games. So it'll never die. It could go down to $1 if it fails. But if it works, you're looking at a very, very high price and much higher adoption. And that looks more and more likely every day, especially, and I don't want to focus too much on price, but when you do see $17 billion market caps, trading above 1,000, these kind of indicators, that does bring new adopters, and it does make it more serious, and hopefully would be the size of a successful tech company, like you're looking at a $500 billion valuation or something like that. I think is very realistic. So you'd be looking at $10 or $20 or $40,000 per coin. And as far as adoption goes, I think that it helps when you have a high price like that. And also a lot of this blockchain, even the blockchain not Bitcoin mania, I think helps because there's all these blockchain projects that are coming along. Some will be okay. A lot of them are missing the boat on what is important about this, which is being decentralized and not controlled. And they're going to learn. Some of them will learn a painful lesson. They'll get hacked or something. But hopefully, eventually, they're just going to realize that a truly decentralized platform like Bitcoin is the superior chain. And that will lead to adoption as well. Just like services like CompuServe and Prodigy and AOL helped further the World Wide Web and the rest of the internet. That's how a lot of these blockchain projects are going to end up.
Yeah, that's interesting metaphor for it, or comparison of the internet to Bitcoin, which I always do because I kind of was around when the internet started up as well. So to me, seeing Bitcoin, all the stuff it's going through is very similar to what the internet was going through from like 1993 to 1995 sort of area. Exactly. What's your take on the entire Bitcoin block size debate?
Well, I like to call it the capacity debate because it's more about getting the capacity that we need to do the transactions that we need. Block size is just one way to address that. I don't think anybody really cares about what the block size is. What they care about is how many transactions. So if there's another way to do it, if you could decrease the block size, but you could have more transactions, I think everybody would be happy with that. There isn't so far a way to do that. And most of the people who are in favor of larger blocks want to they want to have that method be one of the primary methods and look at some of these other ways to scale as well. I think basically the trick with the block size is Bitcoin, when it first came out, we were all talking about this being a almost free way to transfer money. Some people even describe it, sometimes I'll catch myself, I'll even describe it that way. I'll say you can transfer money instantly and free or almost free. Well, it's really not almost free. I mean, we have a lot of transaction costs that are in the 10, 20, 30, even more than 30 cent range. So that eliminates a lot of use cases when you're talking about getting a penny to read an article or something like that. That isn't going to be possible if you have to pay 30 cents if you're paying a penny to read the article, and then it costs 30 cents to transfer the Bitcoin. That doesn't work. And no matter what the solution is, if you have all of these apps that piggyback on the Bitcoin blockchain, and you have all of these low value transactions or microtransactions, the blocks are always going to be full. So even if you increased them to 100 megabytes, they're still going to be full because free is free. So there has to be other solutions. I think some of these kind of off-chain solutions, if you have separate chains where people can bundle transactions, and I don't want to get too technical, and I'm not the right person to get too technical anyway, but I think if you look at some of these other solutions, side chains, and multiple ways to attack this problem, like segregated witness, which is something that's being rolled out right now, hopefully, I think that'll address it. And I'm not too concerned about it long term. I think that on the one hand, you're always going to have all blocks always full, basically. That's what will be a successful network. But I'm not worried about that. I think that you're also going to have a lot of ways that we haven't even conceived of yet, which are going to be able to cover a lot more transactions that we can cover right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are you into any altcoins at all, or is your main focus Bitcoin?
I'm into a few of them. I'm not really a Bitcoin purist. I think that the Bitcoin blockchain is the strongest blockchain, and if I was going to launch an altcoin, I would launch it on the Bitcoin chain, and I think it's the most real and solid blockchain. And I think it's especially funny when a lot of these people are really into blockchain, but they shun Bitcoin. They shun the most successful example of this technology. But I'm invested in some of the other ones. I have a little bit of Ethereum. I like Zcash, Monero. Sometimes I'll pick up a little bit of something when it comes out, or I do advisory work for some coin and I'll get some coin, or some of them they've even given away for free. There's exchanges that have tried to promote a new coin, and I own this and that. And there's been a couple of them where I had 1,000 coins of something when it was worth 10 cents, and now it's worth $3 each or something like that. So, some of them you don't even notice. But yeah, mainly I'm focused on Bitcoin by far, as far as what I put my time and energy into.
What do you put most of your time and energy into? I know that you're involved in the Bitcoin Foundation. I believe you have your own sort of financial company. What is it exactly you do most days?
So my financial company, Atlantic Financial, has been around for about 20 years, and what we do is advise ultra high net worth, really complex clients, sovereign wealth funds, deca billionaires, very, very, very wealthy families and individuals, and some companies and hedge funds. And over the years, I've gravitated more towards big picture economic advisory, especially the stuff that I'm interested in, like free markets. I've done a lot of work in Saudi Arabia, for example, and which may sound funny, but I've talked about free markets there a lot. And there's actually, even in a place that is not what we would call a libertarian culture, there are still opportunities to enact free market proposals. I mean, there are things that we can do, and hopefully I've contributed to in some small ways, where you can do things where you eliminate regulation, you become free, at least in certain areas. So I've done a lot of that kind of advisory, and then over the last few years I've been really focusing on trying to focus more time on blockchain type of things. So one thing, I'm working on I'm writing a book about blockchain technology, particularly focusing on the people behind it, which I think is really interesting. A lot of interesting characters who are mutual friends of you and I that I think should be written about. And then trying to transition my advisory business to be more focused on this technology, which is a little hard, ironically, because I'm blessed with all these really, really huge clients. But the funny thing is, my clients are actually too large, where for most of them, Bitcoin is just too immature of a market. They can't do big acquisitions of billion-dollar companies. They can't even put $1 billion worth of funds into Bitcoin itself that easily. So that's kind of ironic, but the space is getting more mature now, and there is companies. Probably in 2017 we may see our first $1 billion valuation of a Bitcoin company, certainly close to that. So we're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's quite exciting to me, is all that. And it's interesting that you have such big clients. That Bitcoin's still too small for them to get in. Hopefully, at some point, it is big enough for them to get in. And lots of stuff happening. And it's really great to hear, too, that you're going around talking to some of these countries, trying to get some more freedom enacted or unredacted legislation and stuff like that, and regulations. That's great. I do a little bit of that, too. It's hard work, but sometimes you can get someone to listen to you. So yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to sort of follow up with or end with?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting when you to talk about other countries, because that's an interesting experience that I've had. When you go to another country, particularly one that is not like Saudi Arabia, that is definitely would be high on the list of non-libertarian countries, you can still find areas where you can reach people with these concepts, and you can if you figure out what is important to them and what makes them tick and what their core values are, you can make a lot. Like I've actually, believe it or not, I've gone to Saudi Arabia and met really, really senior members of the government, the royal family, and I've talked about things like legalizing prostitution, legalizing drugs. This is a place where movie theaters aren't even legal. And if you find out what is important to them, for instance, in the Quran, there's a lot of stuff about, sort of a man's home is his castle kind of thing. So they actually have very good rights about, it's very unlikely that somebody's going to bust into your home no matter what you're doing. So, zeroing in on those kind of things and focusing on them, they have some good things about property rights, believe it or not. And then something like drugs, I've said, hey, even if you hate drugs, do you have a moral right to harm another human because they do drugs? And if people start to think of it that way, say, yeah, Jace, I may hate drugs with a passion, but I really don't consider myself a violent person. So it's just like here, pointing out you have to be very tactful with it, because if you say you're violent, people shut up. But you have to very tactfully say, hey, you're actually doing a violent thing here. Maybe there's a better way, and then you got to be ready to explain the better way and explain it in a way that they understand. Another example, in Saudi Arabia, it used to be pretty much illegal for women to work in retail. And one of the first exceptions they made for that was in lingerie stores, because they had this kind of moral code where they separate men and women. Well, it's not appropriate by their own standards to have women going in trying on underwear and lingerie in Victoria's Secret and having a man be the one waiting on them. So they had kind of this cognitive dissonance saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to separate men and women, but we're kind of violating our own religion here by having these men be the attendants. So they said, all right, we're going to make an exception to this rule. We're going to allow women to work in Victoria's Secret. Well, instantly overnight, you had 8,000 new jobs created by all these women who went to work at Victoria's Secret. The women are happier, the customers are happier, the employees are happier, and that's actually a free market type of solution. I mean, that's something that I used as examples many times. I say, look, here's a case where you guys took away a law and you did a good thing. You did a good thing for yourself. You did a good thing even for your religion. You did a good thing for your economy. You did a good thing for these jobs. So it's a win-win for everyone. And if you can find those kind of things in activism, particularly in other countries in the world, I think that's a good way to chip away and get some more freedom out there in the world.
Yeah, that's great stories there. Yeah, it's kind of funny about the legalizing all drugs there. You could kind of say, what would Mohammed do? Would Mohammed kidnap someone and put them in a cage because they had some plants in their pockets?
Yeah, Yeah, I've found some. I'm not Muslim. I'm certainly no Islamic scholar, but I've tried to find some scholars that I can sort of point to and quote and stuff. And some of them are, believe it or not, there's quite a few libertarian Muslims. Some of them are imams, some of them are very well-respected religious scholars, and they talk about these things. I saw one of them giving a speech, and he said, "Hey, he listed off all of these sins and everything." He said, "Yeah, sure, that's part of our religion. I get it, but it's not your business. It's between God and those people. It's not your business. It's not your problem. Even if you think this and this and this and this is a sin, it's not your business to go and cage them or kidnap them or hire somebody to cage them and kidnap them and judge them and do violence on them. Let them be a sinner. And if you want to talk to them, I mean, perfect example, you always hear about the religious police in Saudi Arabia. They're the ones that get all the bad press. They're the ones that actually arrest you for a man and a woman going to coffee together. They're the ones that do all the crazy things that you hear about. Well, even within that movement, there are some, I don't want to call them libertarians, but certainly more libertarian people than others. It's sort of fragmented. And there's one group that says, look, we don't have the right to arrest anybody or do anything. All we have the right to do is go up to them and say, hey, Jeff, I really think that God wouldn't like your lifestyle. And that's it. And that's cool. With those people, I say, hey, more power to you. If you're not using force, you can preach all you want. You can tell Jeff don't smoke pot, or don't walk out in public with a female who he's not related to, or whatever. That's fine. And it's not like as much of a divide as you would think, because even the guys who are doing the violence don't really think of themselves as violent. They don't want to be violent. So just that tiny shift. They had a new head of this Haya, that's what they call the religious police, who said, okay, no more chasing people, no more car chases, no more, and I mean, it sounds crazy to us, especially as anarchists, but it is a step. It's a tiny step the right way. And I mean, I don't care if they have 50,000 religious police, if they have no power to arrest you. As I always say when I'm talking about taxation being theft, I say, if it's a suggestion, I got no problem with suggestions. You can make suggestions all you want, no matter how out there you may view a certain religious suggestion or what somebody considers a sin. If they want to say, hey, you're a sinner, great, more power to you. It's only when they have that one, which a lot of people view as a tiny extra step, but it's a huge extra step where they say, okay, now I'm going to arrest you because I don't like the clothes you're wearing, or I don't like that you have a mohawk, or you're a woman without a headscarf. And it's that tiny extra step that is where all the problem is. So if you can convince people just very simply, I'm sure you've been in many debates, you just say, one way I've found in debates when I'm talking to statists, they say, hey, we should do this and this and this. And rather than disagree with them, even if I do disagree with the principle, I'll sometimes say, okay, that's great. I agree that everybody should have a minimum wage, everybody should have this and this and this, but let's just make it voluntary. It's that one key word that makes all the difference. Minimum wage is great as long as it's voluntary. I mean, $30 an hour minimum wage. Just make it voluntary, and don't enforce it with violence. And I found that I always try and change minds. When I'm on Facebook and stuff, I don't want to just argue. I want to actually change people's minds, and I found that is one way that might help with it, because nobody wants to be thought of as violent.
Yeah, it's true. It's this weird cognitive dissonance, as you pointed out, and indoctrination, and just the culture, everything on TV, and you go to your government indoctrination camps, and they just tell you this is all normal, what we're doing out there. That guy had some plants, so 20 guys with guns who were paid for by extorted funds go in and bust it down, shoot his dog, put him in a cage, and then we all pay for him to sit in that cage for like 5 years. This is just normal. There's nothing wrong with this sort of system.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to wake people up, and that's great to hear that you're doing that in your own ways.
Yeah, I was saying to somebody the other day, they said something about how discrimination should be against the law. It should be, like this thing going on in North Carolina, they should have to, not be allowed to discriminate. And I said, well, if you run into somebody who is a racist, okay, or they discriminate, do you punch them in the head? Most people don't. I mean, you don't go in your apartment complex and just punch somebody in the head, or you meet somebody in an airplane and they use even a very offensive racial term. Usually, you don't punch them in the head. So, would you pay somebody else to punch them in the head? Probably not. Well, that's kind of exactly what you're doing. I mean, discrimination and racism are horrible things, but you still don't have the moral right to go and do harm against somebody. And as you know, when you're supporting these laws where they make it illegal to say certain things, or illegal to discriminate, or illegal to do this or that, that's what you're really doing. I mean, you're just removing yourself one step from it. You'd actually be more honest if you went and punched them in the head and, were your own enforcer. Say, I am so offended by those forbidden plants that I'm going to get my posse together, and me and Jeff and some friends, we're going to raid your house in the middle of the night and grab your. You would never do that. And that's the way law enforcement should be. My great grandfather was a Texas sheriff back in the old Wild West, basically, and it was a volunteer job. Last thing he wanted to do was arrest somebody. And if there was trouble, like not quite the old movies, but if somebody in town looked like they were going to cause trouble, his effort was to try and diffuse it. Like, hey, you guys seem to be arguing a lot. Why don't you not hang out with each other? Or you're going down a path. And he try and the last thing he wanted to do was go and arrest somebody, because there was no quotas. He wasn't getting paid. He wanted to work on his farm. It's volunteer work to be a sheriff. He wasn't having any fun. And probably once in a 30-year career, somebody does something really bad, and it was a posse, and you'd get people where, if you and I were living next to each other and somebody did something real bad, you'd be with me if I said, Jeff, look what this guy did. Come on. You'd get 4 or 5 friends. You go and grab the guy. But you wouldn't be psyched about it. You'd be like, oh, great. Thank you, Bruce. I'm so glad you called. You'd be like, oh, gosh, this is a hassle. And that's the way it should be. Law enforcement should be a hassle for the people doing it. They should arrest, and these kind of things should be an absolute last resort. And if we just think about it and frame it that way, it becomes a lot better way of looking at it. I think we've moved pretty far from that, unfortunately, in modern reality, though.
Oh man, so far. I was just watching on Facebook the other day and just came across my feed something from CBS, and it was a police chase in Los Angeles, and it had been going on. It was live on TV for like hours, and I tuned into it. I'm like, what is this crap? And it was this helicopter guy, and he's sort of like he's sort of a journalist in the helicopter, and he's sort of like talking as they're following this car, and they said, yeah, they think he might have a weapon, but he's basically wanted because basically, he didn't stop for the police. That's why he's being followed or something, right? So no real crime. They think he might have a weapon. And this guy is just going off. And then the guy in the helicopter said, at one point, he was like, man, this is the first day of the year, and that's a K9 unit behind him. We might get to see a K9 takeout right here on the first day of the year. He's all excited, like he's all like getting whipped up. I'm like, what did this guy do, first of all? Yeah. You're all excited to see him being like bitten by a dog? This excites you? This is a weird, the number strange...
of people that if you're actually excited that they arrest is pretty minimal. And especially a lot of these crimes arise from, like Eric Gardner, it's some tiny thing, and then they get, the quote unquote real crime is resisting or something like that. But if you take all the victimless crimes out in the first place, I mean, what would we lose? 95% of the arrests, and then of the rest, even a lot of those are kind of questionable. And the whole thing about saving you from crime is even rarer. I think it's something like a dozen times a year where police actually just happen to be wandering down the alley, like in the movies, like, oh wow, a mugging in progress, let's save them. I mean, that just doesn't really happen. You call after the fact. But even muggings aren't that rare. If you ever look at, I like the real life superhero project. These are people that dress up as superheroes. Some of them do charity work. Some of them actually go out and try and fight crime. There's a hilarious line in the documentary. You can see it on Netflix. The San Diego Police Department was very upset about this, and they said, hey, you can't just put on a costume and go out and fight crime. They're very upset about that. Little do they realize that's exactly what they're doing. But the funny thing is about these guys, if you or I go out in even in the most violent city in America at 2 a.m. and we go look for crime, it's really hard to find crime. You're not just going to wander around like a superhero and see somebody being mugged in an alley. It's pretty rare, and especially if you eliminate victimless crimes. You can find drugs easy enough in a major city, but if you eliminate victimless crimes, I mean, there's just not a lot of people out there who are super motivated to be stabbing people or mugging people or whatever. I mean, it does exist. There are definitely evil people, and the one sympathy I have for cops is that they do deal with some sliver of who they deal with are actually bad people that are evil. They do exist, but their whole job and their safety and everything would be so different if we didn't have these victimless crimes to worry about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'd be night and day different without it, and it's crazy. The police state right now in the U.S. It's just craziness. But so I know you're a really busy guy. Unless you had something else you wanted to talk about, or you want to go on.
Let's see. Yeah, no, I got a couple minutes. Let's see. Is there anything else that we should cover? Yeah, I mean, I could talk about freedom stuff all day. I mean, it's pretty cool. I think I think it's hopefully. I mean, what do you think about this? Do you think more people are getting exposed to these? It seems like maybe I'm just living in a bubble, no different than some of the statists where all my friends are starting to think the same. But to me, it seems that social media and the ability to share these things, I mean, that's how a lot of us got into this movement. That's how a lot of people, I mean, without Ron Paul, you'd probably have quite a bit different list of who's an anarchist, who's a libertarian now. A lot of those people sort of started in the last 15 years or so. What do you think? Do you think is it a positive sign that we're able to share stuff that people are going to start thinking about these things more?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I started really getting into the liberty stuff around 2002. I started my stuff like Anarchast 2011. I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, and it was really pretty quiet back then. Like not a lot of anarchists, not a lot of people really understood liberty. Just after 2008 with Ron Paul, as you pointed out, that started to wake some people up. 2012 started to wake more people up. But it was pretty quiet. And then it's in the last few years, I've just seen an explosion. And actually, Anarchapulco is a good example of that. That was less than a few hundred people for the first one 2 years ago. It was around 500 last year. It's probably going to be 700 to 1,000 this year. And so that's just one example of the growth. But I can see it happening all over the place. And you're starting to see it leak into all the mainstream sort of stuff too. You see people like Bill Maher, who's that comedian guy on HBO, he says he's a libertarian. He's Glenn Beck, who's not a libertarian, says he's a libertarian. They all say they're libertarians now because it's kind of cool. It's like everyone's like, yeah, I'm a libertarian because I hear, all the kids talking about it and it's really cool. They don't know what it is, but,
Paul Ryan is
it's definitely growing.
Yeah, I think anarchist has become the new libertarian. I mean, when I started in this, you didn't really hear much about anarchists. I think Jeffrey Tucker might have been one of the first kind of people that I didn't think was crazy who called himself an anarchist. And what was it? I might have been reading Rothbard or something like that, and I'm like, oh wow, like a regular person who is coherent who says they're an anarchist. That's interesting. And that was only, I don't know, probably 12 years ago or something like that. I had heard of libertarian, like I mentioned, but I sort of, thought like sort of they're crazy. Now I think most people are at least familiar with the basics of what libertarian is, and maybe anarchist is the new libertarian. It's sort of the, it's considered crazy by a lot of mainstream people, but they know that it exists. I mean, they maybe an increasing number are recognizing that this is a real movement that makes sense. Typically, I've found that anarchists have thought about their philosophy way, way, way more than anyone else. So they're very hard to win an argument with. And I have a lot of friends that I've learned a lot from on social media because I see how they talk, and you see people like you or Larkin Rose or a lot of people who aren't even famous in the space who just have a really good core foundation with their anarchy beliefs. And I learn a lot from that. So I think that's really interesting. And hopefully maybe libertarian will become mainstream, even if it gets washed out by the Glenn Becks and the Paul Ryans of the world. And people even criticize Jerry Johnson. Maybe that becomes the new Republicans, and anarchist becomes the new libertarians. Maybe that would be fine with me if it helped sway everything. And the other thing that I haven't seen much positive progress with, but I'd love to have some hope on, is that this huge generation of upset millennials, the Bernie Sanders crowd, I hope that some of them look at anarchy and libertarianism as an alternative. Obviously I didn't support Trump, but one of the few good things about it was I said, well, here's the way that 30 million people get a really violent slap in the face that says maybe the state isn't all that. You have Obama just signing this NDAA with giving the government all kinds of even more powers, including over regulation of news and stuff like that. Hopefully some supporters, particularly the Bernie supporters, not really the Hillary people, but the Bernie people will look at this and say, gee, maybe it's not so great to have these broad, far-reaching powers in the hands of one person, or even have such a powerful government. And maybe also I kind of like that people are ridiculing the presidency. I mean, before you and I were born, in our parents' generation, I mean, it was unheard of. Right or wrong, disagree or agree, Republican or Democrat, you support the president. That's your duty as an American, and you got to wave the flag and do that. And now, hopefully, one of the results we could have of this is if 30 million people don't have any respect for the presidency, and they start to look at it in other ways. And unfortunately, they're so status-driven, they may not see these. That's the one key that your viewers and activists can do, maybe, is to go out to these. I don't view the Bernie people as enemies. A lot of them particularly are really young people. They just haven't thought about this stuff that much. And they're right about the problems. I mean, they're right. There is corporatism. There is all kinds of problems in this country. And even Michael Moore, I probably agree with him on 85% of the problems. The only place where we differ is his solutions. He's right. Healthcare sucks, but the solution to that is, less regulation. Every single company he mentioned in his movie Sicko ended up huge benefits from Obamacare. All these executives that he thought were so horrible, and all these companies that he said were so bad, they just got a huge boondoggle at the expense of the taxpayer. So, he's complaining about the water in Flint, Michigan. Well, that's the government's fault. You want to solve these things, have more free market solutions. And Bernie, I mean, half of what he says, he's right about the problems. Some of them he's wrong, but a lot of the problems he's right on. Where he's always wrong is the solutions. But I would love to. I mean, if I had an opportunity, and because they have motivation, they're energized, they care about these issues, they tend to be pretty smart people. I'd love to go and speak to 500 diehard Bernie people and talk. Remember those old the old Milton Friedman videos from the 80s when he'd go into these really liberal schools and the students would all argue with him, and I'd love to see a Milton Friedman of our age, or maybe even you or I could do it. Go talk to some of these Bernie fans, even one-on-one, and try and show them that you're right about the problems, but the solutions are not more government.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Ron Paul sort of really just being thrown out of the elections in 2008, 2012, really woke up a lot of people to becoming libertarian and then anarchist afterwards. But they were more sort of like the conservative side sort of people. So they realized the conservatives was all crap. They caught on to what Ron Paul was saying. They started to wake up and they said, okay, libertarianism is where it's at. Then they saw Ron Paul get thrown out and they're like, that's it, I'm an anarchist.
Yeah.
And this exact same thing happened with Bernie. Bernie is essentially the communist Ron Paul. As you pointed out,
exactly.
He points out, just like Ron Paul does, a lot of problems, which is great. But unlike Ron Paul, he's got like the worst solutions ever. He's like, yeah, let's just throw more money at this beast and make it even bigger.
No solutions, exactly. Yeah. Someday I want to get somebody to go through all the spending bills that he voted for and see how much money he gave to corporations. He's Mr. Anti-Corporate. Well, there are few people on the face of planet Earth who have personally been responsible for giving more money to CEOs than Bernie Sanders. Every single spending bill he's ever been able to vote on for 30 years, he's voted in favor of it. So where do you think that money goes? It doesn't go to me or you. I mean, it goes to Halliburton and GE and all these mega contractors, and Bernie Sanders has been there, vote after vote after vote, voting for hundreds and hundreds of billions of our money to be given to these, so-called fat cat CEOs that he despises so much. It's really interesting if you think about it that way. I would love to see, for whatever reason, the libertarians, when they run, they tend to run as Republicans. So we have a couple really, really good people, in my opinion, Justin Amash and Thomas Massey, especially. But you could just as easily, I'm in Massachusetts, I've thought about it, I could have exactly the same opinions that I have and run as a Democrat. And it's real hard in the primary process in a state like Massachusetts or California. But it would be really interesting, you have Libertarian Republicans. I mean, why not throw the D next to your name? And I even thought about running for office before. I'm not going to do it. But if I were to run against somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who's in my state, I would run as a Libertarian Republican, which would be easy because it's easy to get the nomination as a Republican. But I would go to the left of her on many issues. She talks about being against Wall Street. Well, she supported TARP. She was the TARP administrator. She's the one who gave those checks to the bankers. She's not anti-banker. She's the best friend they ever had in the history of the world. You can go to the left of these people on war, more war, torture, drones, bombings, Wall Street bonus bailouts, all of these issues that their supporters don't really like, and that's why Hillary lost. The people aren't really excited about having Dick Cheney in a pantsuit, and some of them get fooled by the rhetoric of some silly person like Elizabeth Warren, but all it takes is somebody to push back a little bit, and you realize that it's a house of cards that falls apart. So maybe that's another way to get people on that path like Ron Paul did. You get people into libertarianism and then eventually into anarchy, by doing it in a way that they recognize, like Ron Paul did through a party. I'd love to see a libertarian Democrat out there. Why not?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter as a libertarian. You're basically not either one, but
right.
you're half of each one. So it's like, I'm all for guns. I'm all for. What else do conservatives like? Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be low on spending, but they haven't.
All right, I'm all for small government. I'm all for guns.
Even Bush was huge on spending, Medicare and all this stuff. War.
Well, even Reagan, who they said was the small government guy who got in, he was sort of like the libertarian president of the last few decades, and he doubled the size of the U.S. government during his. He can't stop these things.
Yeah, at least you get some things where you get some of this stuff like I think it was the Interstate Transportation Safety board. Remember they used to have those way stations on, every 10 miles on the highway? Mm-hmm. Reagan got rid of that. People thought he was crazy. They're like, how can you be against highway safety? How on earth can you be against people being safe on the highway? We're all going to die. Everybody's going to be driving down the highway, and nobody's going to control these trucks. Nobody's regulating them. We're all going to die. And, I'm sure that things are much safer now without that organization. But maybe if I've said many times that since the election, with the people who are so upset about Trump, I say, hey, you want to fight Trump? Don't bother attacking his memes or his tweets or whatever. You want to fight Trump? Don't pay your taxes, ideally, if you got the guts to. I don't have the guts. I'm not that brave. I don't like people with guns coming to my door. But if you're brave enough, don't pay your taxes. And if otherwise, work to starve the beast. Trump. People say they're afraid of Trump. A lot of people are like, I'm terrified of Trump. No, nobody's terrified of Trump. Trump's been around for 70 years. Nobody was scared of him 5 years ago. He's just a guy with a Twitter account and a TV show. 70-year-old guy that says things that aren't even that crazy compared to, you and I both have people on our Facebook that say much crazier things than Trump does. But what's scary about him is the power that he has. There's nothing scary about Trump. It's scary that this particular guy has this particular power. So I tried to say to opponents of Trump, maybe that's another way to try and bring him to our world, is to say, hey, starve the beast. Get rid of all these executive powers and make it so that it doesn't matter who he is. Just like I've said about Hitler and Stalin, these guys, no matter how bad you are, it's pretty hard. Even the worst mass murderers only usually kill a couple dozen people. But you put even Obama, who's not considered by many to be super violent or super horrible, he's killed way, way, way more people than than somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer. If you limit the power, what would Hitler have done? He would have gone on a shooting spree at worst and maybe killed a dozen people. It's the beast of government that's the power. So, maybe try and get that message to the people who are, because this emotion that they have about being so upset about Trump, maybe it can be used in some positive way. I'm always trying to find the silver lining. If we can get a few more libertarians out of it, then, I don't want to say good that Trump won, but it's a silver lining that we get from it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We should always be doing that. So with the Ron Paul people, they're all really angry. We welcome them in. Hey, come over here. You were that close to actually understanding what's really good. And then with the Bernie Sanders people, I agree. We should all be out there just talking to them like, yeah, Bernie's got totally right. All these problems, the big government, the banks, these corporate, the crony capitalists, all this sort of stuff. But here's actually the solutions. You should look into this, and sort of just, always find a way. And the interesting thing about this, these people are really upset about Trump and really sad about Hillary Clinton, is that they're kind of doing a lot of the things that we would want them to do. They're actually moving for secession of California state. That's great. Secede. If at first you don't secede, try again. Secede every state. Yeah. That'd be great. Some of them have even talked about doing a tax protest. And I'm like, great. Protest tax, that's awesome. So some of the solutions they're coming up to with their unhappiness with the system are actually very libertarian anarchist sort of solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And disrespect of the office too.
Oh yeah.
You're having because some of these people I presume are from the generation, especially where they were raised like, our parents' generation, where you just don't criticize the president. Your time to criticize is 4 years later in the voting booth, and that those are silly concepts that. As I always say, politicians told me we should respect politicians, just like, government schools told me anarchy's bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. Great talking to you, Bruce. I didn't know, how into all this stuff you were. We actually never really met in person, I don't think, unless somewhere at a concert. Yeah. And barely even talked on Facebook before, so it's been really great talking to you.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, why don't you let people know where they can find you? I was just following your Twitter, and actually, you have a lot of great tweets on here. So let people know about your Twitter, and if you want to let them know about Facebook. Yeah, my
Twitter is Bruce Fenton, Fenton. My Facebook, I have two. I have a private one, or the profile and the page. The page is where you want to go if you're interested in politics. That's facebook.com, Bruce Fenton page. You'll know the difference if you look at them. One of them I post, only when I can't resist every couple of weeks. Because sometimes the audience, your friends from high school or whatever, sometimes they really need to hear these messages. I try not to shove it down their throat too much, but I try and be more tactful on that page, but usually that's, pictures of my kids or something. But the other page, the big page, the one with 100,000, 130,000 people or something, that's pretty much politics all day, every day. I really, one of my favorite things is learning from the people on there when they make comments. Sometimes it'll hone my opinions or sharpen my argument, or maybe in some cases I'll reconsider things. One thing that I've come, it's even still a journey right now, but there are still a couple things like, becoming more on the anarchist spectrum, learning like, okay, well, here's a thing that I agree with in principle, but how would we actually do it? These kind of things. And there's a lot of people that have good solutions. So I love, sharing that, the audience is the best part about this. There's so many smart people. And, like I said, these are, in my opinion, the most well-informed people. You don't just become an anarchist because your parents were an anarchist, or you were a member of the anarchist party, or you have the right T-shirt, or you wanted to go and hang out at the meetups and meet members of the opposite sex. You become an anarchist because you really think about this stuff, and usually you read books and you talk to people. At the very least, you read videos and you discuss it and you think about these things. And nobody started. Everybody starts as a Republican or Democrat or something else, but very few people start as an anarchist. So therefore, I think they're people that have really well-formed opinions, which is useful. And if you can get people to discuss things in a reasonable way, it's hard on social media sometimes, but it's also the biggest advantage of it, where you can have that format to get people to think about these things. And so I really love that. So yeah, Facebook's a great way to connect. I'd love to get always meet more people in this space. It's great.
Yeah, and you'll meet a lot more if you come down to Acapulco. I know that you're just checking your schedule. Yeah. Hopefully we can have you speak at that. We're going to have one full day on cryptocurrencies called Cryptopoco and blockchain. There's going to be people like Roger Ver, Trace Mayer, Tone Vase. There's going to be Chris Horlacher of Equibit. That's really interesting. They're just about to launch what they're doing, basically putting all stocks on the blockchain. Dan Larimer of Steemit, very interesting blockchain-based social media. Sure. Jose Rodriguez with Bitso, the largest Mexican Bitcoin exchange. So many great people are going to be here. So, yeah, I hope to see you down here.
Yeah.
So that's February 25th to 28th, and the Cryptopoco is February 28th for people out there. And so check that out, and you can check it all out at anarchapoco.com. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share it down below. It's been a great talk with Bruce Fenton, and we'll hopefully see him down in Anarchapoco in February. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace,
thanks,
love, and anarchy.
How was the conference this year?
Absolutely fantastic.
It's an amazing experience.
The conference is great. It's the best thing I've ever been to, probably in my life, honestly.
It is a blast. It's really fun. There's so many things to do.
Just the spirit, just the energy, amazing moments, amazing people.
It's really, really fun.
It's better than you could expect.
I think it's the best conference I've ever been to.